Every day, people make financial decisions that feel personal. What to buy, what to upgrade, what to keep, what to replace, what feels normal, what feels behind. And most of the time, those decisions feel like individual preferences, personal taste, personal choice, personal lifestyle. But modern consumer culture does something powerful. It shapes preferences before people even realize preferences are being shaped. That is the uncomfortable part. Because people are not only deciding what they want, they are constantly being shown what they should want. And over time, repeated exposure quietly changes what feels normal. Not through one dramatic moment, through repetition, through comparison, through convenience, through emotional suggestion. And once consumer culture becomes familiar enough, many financial decisions stop feeling influenced at all. They simply feel like life. This is Streetwise Wealth Academy. I'm Winston, your synthetic financial educator. This content is educational commentary only and is not personalized financial advice, so always research financial decisions carefully. One of the most important things to understand about consumerism is that it does not only sell products, it sells expectations. That distinction matters enormously. Because products are visible, expectations are much harder to notice. A person may recognize an advertisement, but they may not recognize how thousands of repeated messages slowly reshape what they believe a normal life should look like. That is where consumer culture becomes powerful. It changes the emotional baseline. What once felt optional eventually feels standard. What once felt luxurious eventually feels ordinary. What once felt unnecessary eventually feels like part of adulthood. And once expectations change, financial behavior changes with them. Now, this does not mean every purchase is bad, and it does not mean people should feel guilty for enjoying things. That is not the point. Comfort matters, convenience matters, quality of life matters. The deeper issue is understanding how environments influence desire, because desire does not appear in isolation. It is shaped by what people repeatedly see, repeatedly hear, repeatedly compare themselves against, repeatedly associate with success, comfort, status, or belonging. And modern environments are extremely effective at creating those associations. Advertising does not only say, "Buy this product." It often says, "This product means progress. This product means confidence. This product means stability. This product means success. This product means you are not behind." And when messages like that repeat long enough, they begin shaping emotional expectations underneath awareness. Now, another important layer here is comparison. Human beings naturally compare. That is normal psychology. But modern comparison is not occasional anymore. It is constant. Social media, entertainment, advertising, influencer culture, curated lifestyles, upgraded homes, better cars, better meals, better vacations, better versions of normal. And over time, constant exposure quietly changes what people view as ordinary. Not because people consciously decide to compare every moment, because the human mind adapts to surrounding environments. If upgraded living is always visible, upgraded living starts feeling more standard. And once it feels standard, spending to reach or maintain that standard becomes easier to justify emotionally. That is one way consumerism shapes decisions. It changes the target. Now, another important factor here is identity. Modern consumer culture often connects purchases with who people believe they are. A certain phone, a certain car, a certain style, a certain neighborhood, a certain brand, a certain lifestyle. These things become emotional signals, not just objects. Signals of taste, progress, belonging, competence, success. And once purchases become tied to identity, financial decisions become more emotionally complicated. Because people are not only buying the thing, they may also be buying the feeling attached to the thing. That feeling can be powerful, especially when someone feels behind, stressed, overlooked, or uncertain. Now, this does not mean people are irrational. It means people are human. Human beings respond to meaning. And consumer culture is very good at attaching meaning to products. That is why spending often feels emotional. A purchase can feel like relief, a reward, a reset, a small proof that life is improving. And in the moment, that feeling may be real. The issue is not that the feeling exists. The issue is what happens when emotional purchases become repeated systems. Because repeated systems shape financial structure over time. Now, another important layer is convenience. Consumer culture works best when buying becomes easy. The fewer steps between desire and purchase, the more likely behavior becomes automatic. Tap to pay, one-click ordering, stored payment methods, instant checkout, same-day delivery, automatic renewals, everything designed to reduce pause moments. And pause moments matter. Pauses create reflection. Reflection creates awareness. Without pauses, desire can turn into spending before the person fully evaluates the decision. Not because they are weak, because low-friction environments shape behavior. That is normal psychology. Now, another factor is emotional exhaustion. People do not make spending decisions in a vacuum. They make them after long days, after stress, after work, after disappointment, after mental overload. And when people are exhausted, consumer systems offer quick emotional relief. Food delivery, entertainment, shopping, upgrades, small rewards, a moment of control, a moment of comfort, a moment of escape. That is why consumerism becomes especially powerful during stressful seasons. It does not only offer products, it offers emotional regulation. And emotional regulation can become financially expensive when repeated often enough. Now, another important layer is normalization. At first, a purchase feels special. Then eventually it feels routine. At first, a convenience feels occasional. Then eventually it feels expected. At first, an upgraded lifestyle feels exciting. Then eventually it feels normal. And once something feels normal, reducing it later feels uncomfortable. Not impossible, but uncomfortable. That is how consumer culture quietly raises the cost of feeling normal. And that phrase matters. The cost of feeling normal. Because many people are not always spending to feel rich. Sometimes they are spending to avoid feeling behind. That is a different emotional mechanism, and it is extremely powerful. Now, another reason consumerism shapes financial behavior is because visible spending gets rewarded socially. A new car gets noticed. New clothes get noticed. A better apartment gets noticed. A vacation gets noticed. A lifestyle upgrade gets noticed. But financial flexibility is mostly invisible. Nobody sees the payment not taken. Nobody sees the subscription canceled. Nobody sees the breathing room created. Nobody sees the future obligation avoided. So the social reward system often favors visible consumption, while ignoring invisible stability. That creates a quiet pressure, because people naturally respond to social signals. Again, not because they are weak, because human beings are social, and consumer culture turns spending into communication. Now, another important factor here is attention. Consumer systems constantly compete for it. Advertisements, recommendations, algorithms, notifications, product placements, limited time offers, influencer content, everything pulling attention toward desire. And attention shapes behavior. What people focus on repeatedly, they begin to consider more seriously. What they see repeatedly, they begin to normalize. What feels familiar often begins to feel safer. That is why attention is so valuable. Before consumer culture gets money, it usually gets attention. And once attention is captured long enough, behavior often follows. Now, this does not mean people are powerless. Far from it. The point is not blame. The point is awareness. Because once people understand how consumer systems shape desire, financial behavior becomes easier to examine without shame. Instead of asking only, "Why did I buy that?" they can also ask, "What made that feel necessary? What environment shaped that desire? What comparison influenced that expectation? What emotion made that purchase feel meaningful? What system reduced the pause before spending?" Those questions create clarity, not guilt. Clarity. Now, if you step back and observe the broader pattern, something becomes visible. Consumer culture shapes attention. Attention shapes desire. Desire shapes spending. Spending shapes expectations. Expectations shape future behavior. And repeated behavior shapes financial structure over time. That is the system. Not one purchase, not one advertisement, not one weak moment. A repeated environment quietly shaping what people view as normal, desirable, and necessary. Now, understanding this should not create cynicism. Cynicism rarely improves clarity. The goal is perspective, because perspective changes observation, and observation changes behavior gradually over time. Once people see how desire is shaped, they can begin interpreting spending differently, less emotionally, more structurally, more clearly. Because consumerism becomes most powerful when people believe every desire started entirely inside themselves. And sometimes, it did not. Sometimes the desire was shaped, suggested, repeated, normalized, attached to identity, attached to comfort, attached to the fear of being behind, and recognizing that does not remove personal responsibility. It makes responsibility more informed. Because financial education is not only about numbers, it is also about understanding the systems that shape decisions before the numbers ever appear. That concludes today's lesson. Peace. If this lesson helped you see money a little differently, then stay with the series. Because financial understanding is not built from one idea. It is built layer by layer, one system, one pattern, one hidden behavior at a time. This first month is focused on the financial lessons many adults were never properly taught growing up. How money moves, how debt works, how stress builds, how behavior gets shaped, and how modern financial systems quietly influence everyday life. So watch the next lesson when you're ready, and keep building the foundation. This is Streetwise Wealth Academy. I'm Winston. Peace.